With me now is Jonathan Sheppard, the former Conservative candidate for Batislau, who has written the book The Very Best of Tory Radio. Jonathan, thank you for coming with us today. Can you tell us how the book came about?
Well, I set Tory Radio up in 2005, as you said, after having stood for Parliament, because the party suddenly didn't get in touch with you. And on the back of that, I recorded a lot of one-on-one interviews with senior Conservative politicians that I found quite interesting. I could get 20-30 minute slot with them, the kind of interviews that you don't get these days. So I thought, what better way to further that audience than by putting some of what I thought were the better, the more interesting interviews into print, into a book. And so that's exactly what I've done.
Now, did you find when you interviewed the people that they weren't actually used to speaking for that long? It sounds like that.
Yeah, I think they actually quite enjoyed it. I think all politicians, to be frank, quite like to hear the sound of their own voice, and that's not meant to be awful. So to give them the opportunity to ask some questions and not to cut them off after 20 seconds, they really enjoyed to be able to talk about specific issues and go into depth, into quite detail. And I think that's where the interviews came into their own, because you were able to delve much deeper than, as you said, than just concentrating on the soundbite.
Is there any one person of interview that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's always quite hard when you've written a book to choose the best one. However, the one that I enjoyed the most was actually speaking to Lord Tebbit, because not only what was in the interview, but we had a good chat afterwards, but I asked him questions about his long and distinguished career, which I found very interesting myself. But the one question that I still remember that I almost regret asking him, but I'm glad I did, was, did he have any political regrets? And he said to me, yes, actually I did. I'd considered leaving party conference a day earlier, and I didn't, and that's obviously when the Brighton bomb happened, and his wife was obviously seriously injured, and getting somebody to talk about something quite personal like that is really quite memorable.
Is there anyone who has really surprised you when you have carried out the interviews?
Yeah, some. I mean, Ken Clarke mentioned the fact that his biggest political regret was introducing speed humps into the country, which I found quite interesting. Talking to Colonel Bob Stewart, he was very adamant that he supports the death penalty. I spoke actually with a person called John Hurst, who's a convicted killer, and I found him absolutely really articulate, and his attention to detail on the prisoners' votes issue, something I fundamentally disagree with him about, but actually the interview, I think, would give food for thought to ministers who are going to have to look at this issue quite seriously.
Did you, when you interviewed them, did you find anyone actually stumped by any of the questions you asked?
Not particularly, no. I think, again, because it was very much an informal setting, and because it was Tory Radio, they felt quite comfortable at talking to me, because I wasn't there trying to get that soundbite to trip them up. I just wanted to hear what they had to say about interesting questions, and for them to have the opportunity to give the answer.
And what about the feedback you had after having interviews from the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, constantly getting great feedback, and certainly when, in some of the interviews, when it is something a little out of the ordinary, the national papers picked up on quite a few of the interviews, because I was able to give them 20-30 minutes the chance to talk to them, that quite often in an unguarded moment they would say something that actually made quite a nice little news story.
Has anyone actually declined to come and be interviewed by you?
Actually, no. Even David Cameron, as Prime Minister, has considered it and never got round to it, and I absolutely respect that. He's a busy man. No one's categorically said, no, I don't want to be interviewed by you.
You've got it in printed form. What are the prospects of a second volume?
Crikey, I suspect I've probably done 200, maybe 300 different interviews. Some were more regular interviews, so we had a regular weekly podcast with Iain Dale to talk about the week's political events. I used to do a monthly interview with the party chairman when it was Francis Maud. So this is just a little brief snippet of some of what I thought were the most interesting ones, but there's certainly scope for doing a second volume.
And have any of the interviews been picked up by mainstream radio as well?
Yeah, to an extent. They will use various snippets. So again, one that actually isn't in the book was when Francis Maud talked about the A-list and spoke about putting mincing metrosexuals into gritty northern seats. That was picked up. So absolutely, so the media do listen to these interviews, and will probably sort of read the book, hopefully.
Now you've got the book. It's being published. Where can they find and hear more about Tory Radio?
They can listen to it. It's online. It's at www.ToryRadio.com.
Thank you for coming and talking to us today.